My sister said, "You don't deserve to attend my engagement party." I stayed silent, just smiled, then booked a trip to Hawaii. A week later, her big day collapsed, and my phone blew up with calls. "Hello everyone. Come on in, grab a cup of tea or a warm coffee, and get comfortable. It has been a good long while since I have talked about this, but I think it is finally time. Some stories just need to be told, you know? Especially for anyone out there who has ever felt like they were pouring from an empty cup for people who do not even appreciate the water. My name is Francine, and my story starts on what should have been just another ordinary, slightly exhausting Tuesday in my Nashville office. The afternoon sun was slanting heavily through the big, floor-to-ceiling windows of my firm, dust motes dancing lazily in the golden light. I am a commercial architect, and my desk that day was a picture of controlled, beautiful chaos. I had blueprints unrolled and weighted down with coffee mugs, swatches of heavy velvet fabric scattered across my keyboard, and multiple vendor files stacked high. I had recently received a major promotion at the firm, taking on high-level corporate clients, which meant my daily salary and responsibilities had bumped up significantly. But honestly, for the last 3 months, my professional life had taken a back seat. My every waking thought had been completely consumed by one very specific, very personal project. I had poured my absolute whole heart into this, and it was not for a paying client. It was for my little sister, Jolene. Jolene was getting engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Desmond. As her big sister, the one who used to tie her shoes and help her with her middle school math homework, I just wanted to give her the absolute world. Our family was not overly affectionate, but since my world was one of design, structure, and creating beautiful spaces, I decided I was going to give her the most beautifully designed, meticulously planned engagement party Nashville had ever seen. I waived my fee entirely, of course. My standard event design and management rate would have been easily in the 5 figures, but this was family. You do not bill family. I spent night after night, long after my regular office work was done and everyone else had gone home, sitting under the harsh fluorescent lights sketching 3-dimensional digital models of the rooftop venue we had chosen. I pictured everything down to the millimeter. I mapped out exactly how the string lights would twinkle against the dark city skyline. I spent weeks coordinating the exact scent profile of the floral arrangements, a blend of southern magnolia and white roses, working closely with Brian Walsh, a high-end florist I had collaborated with for years. I wanted it to be absolutely perfect, a seamless blend of rustic Tennessee charm and sleek modern elegance. I remember sitting there that Tuesday, tracing the structural lines of a custom-built sweetheart table on my computer screen, smiling softly to myself. I had called in massive professional favors. I managed to get Mr. Ortiz, the notoriously strict and rigid manager of the venue, to actually agree to let us hang a massive, heavy floral chandelier right over the center of the dance floor. That alone took 3 separate meetings and a lot of sweet talking. I had spent hours pacing my office on the phone with Mrs. Morgan from the catering company, passionately debating the culinary merits of mini hot chicken biscuits versus elevated shrimp and grits shooters. Every single detail, from the exact thread count of the linen napkins to the embossed font on the place cards, had my fingerprints and my dedication all over it. I was tired. My back ached, my eyes were dry from staring at screens, but it was a happy tired. It was that deep, satisfying exhaustion that only comes from creating something incredibly beautiful for someone you love unconditionally. That afternoon, I was just finalizing the master lighting plan, ensuring the amber glow would be perfectly warm and flattering for the photographer they hired. As the sun finally went down, casting long, dark, quiet shadows across my drafting table, my personal cell phone buzzed. It was sitting right beside a stack of heavy vendor invoices I had just paid out of my own pocket to secure the dates. I glanced at the screen, fully expecting a confirmation text from the luxury linen vendor in Chicago, but the name on the screen was Jolene. My heart did a little happy flip. I figured she was sending me another excited, frantic message about the white dress she had finally chosen, or maybe she wanted to go over the playlist one more time. I picked the phone up, leaning back in my leather chair, a warm, genuine smile already forming on my face. Then I read the words. Francine, Desmond, and I have talked. You do not really fit the vibe of the party. You do not deserve to be there. I read it once. My brain completely stalled. Then I read it twice. Then a third time. The words did not seem to connect in my mind. It felt exactly like I was reading a foreign language I did not understand. The air in my office suddenly felt incredibly thin, making it physically hard to draw a breath. The low, steady humming of the air conditioner overhead seemed to grow deafeningly loud, mocking the sudden silence in my head. My stomach twisted into a tight, freezing cold knot. My own sister. The little girl I used to read bedtime stories to. The woman I was currently bankrupting my own energy and free time for. She just cut me out completely with a sterile text message. Her words were so incredibly cold. So clinical and detached. There was not a single ounce of warmth, hesitation, or regret. You do not deserve to be there. Deserve what? What did that even mean? I sat there staring at the illuminated screen, thinking about the late nights. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had already spent out of my own savings on non-refundable deposits. I thought about the sheer creative energy and professional capital I had poured into this massive event. All of it, every single bit of it, in her eyes, did not even earn me a basic folding chair in the back of the room. My first instinct was to call her immediately. I wanted to hear her say those words out loud. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, to ask her what on earth was wrong with her. But as I sat there, my hand shaking slightly against the smooth surface of my desk, a very strange, eerie calmness washed over me. The hurt was absolutely still there. It was a sharp, physical ache right in the center of my chest. But underneath that hurt, something else was forming. A quiet, steely resolve. I put the phone down on the desk, face down, as if to physically smother the words. I took a deep breath, packed up my laptop, and walked out of the office in complete silence. The drive back to my apartment was a blur. I do not even remember the traffic or the stoplights. When I finally walked through my front door, dropping my heavy bag onto the kitchen counter, the silence of my home felt suffocating. After staring blankly at my kitchen cabinets for what felt like an hour, I finally decided I could not just let that text message hang unresolved in the air. This had to be a mistake. A cruel, thoughtless joke. Something. So my first phone call was not to Jolene. It was to my mom, Loretta. Loretta was always the family mediator, the one who smoothed things over and insisted we all smile for the holiday photos no matter what was happening behind closed doors. I thought if anyone could make sense of this sudden madness, it would be her. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my heart pounding a heavy, nervous rhythm against my ribs. She picked up on the second ring. Francine, honey, how are you? I was just thinking about you. Did you finally get the seating chart sorted out? Her cheerful, completely oblivious tone was like a physical slap across the face. I closed my eyes and took a very shaky breath. Mom. I just got a text from Jolene. There was a pause on the line. It was just a split second, barely a heartbeat, but it was long enough for me to know. She already knew. She knew exactly what I was going to say. Oh, she said, her voice dropping a little too casually. What about, sweetie? She told me I am not invited to the party anymore, I said, the words feeling foreign, ugly, and humiliating in my mouth. She said I do not deserve to be there. The silence on the other end of the line stretched on and on. I could hear the faint, canned laughter of a television game show playing loudly in her living room. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost every ounce of its earlier maternal warmth. It was replaced by a firm, almost chiding tone, like she was correcting a toddler. Francine, you know exactly how your sister gets. She is under a lot of stress right now. Planning a wedding is a huge deal. Desmond's family is, well, they have very high expectations. They run in different circles. Mom, I am the one planning the party, I said, my voice rising in disbelief. I fought hard to keep it steady. I have been working on this for 3 solid months. For free. To make it perfect for her. And we all appreciate that, honey. We really do, she said smoothly. But her words felt entirely hollow, like a rehearsed line. But sometimes you just have to be the bigger person. You are the big sister. Be tough. We helped with your college fund so you could be a successful, independent woman. Do not make a massive fuss over every little thing. It is her special day. Let her have it the way she wants it. The absolute condescension in her voice was breathtaking. Every little thing? She was dismissing my hurt, my months of grueling hard work, and my very presence in our family as a little thing. I felt a hot flash of pure indignation crawl right up my neck. So you are completely okay with this? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. You are okay with your eldest daughter being uninvited from her own sister's family engagement party? I am saying do not make it a bigger deal than it is, she snapped sharply. The family needs to be united right now, not fighting. Just let it go, Francine. Do it for the family. I pulled the phone away from my ear and hung up without saying another word. For the family. The words echoed in my quiet kitchen. I felt utterly, desperately alone. It was crystal clear I was not going to find any support or logic there. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The streetlights outside my window flickered on, casting long shadows across my hardwood floor. I knew what I had to do. I did what I should have done in the very first place. I called Jolene. I needed to hear it from her own mouth. I needed to know why. She answered on the 4th ring with a clipped, highly annoyed tone. What, Francine? I am busy. I got your text, Jolene, I said. I kept my voice perfectly level, completely professional, exactly like I was talking to a difficult, unreasonable client at the firm. She sighed loudly into the receiver, a sound full of theatrical, exaggerated impatience. Look, I was really hoping you would be mature about this. It is not a big deal. It is not a big deal? I repeated, my voice dropping dangerously quiet. You uninvited me from your engagement party. The party I have designed, managed, and planned from the ground up for the last 12 weeks. How is that not a big deal? Okay, fine, she snapped defensively. You want the absolute truth? It is Desmond's friends. They are from a completely different world, Francine. They are investment bankers, corporate lawyers, people with a certain high-level status. And you, with your art projects and your dusty blueprints. You just do not fit in with that crowd. You would make us look bad. It would be socially awkward. I was completely speechless. My jaw practically unhinged. My art projects? I was a licensed, highly sought-after commercial architect with a growing reputation in the state. I designed award-winning spaces. I earned a fantastic salary. But in her superficial eyes, because I worked with my hands and wore practical clothes instead of designer labels, I was just some dusty, embarrassing relative. Desmond and I want a classy, highly sophisticated event, she continued, her voice dripping with venomous, mean girl condescension. And you are just not that. It is not personal, okay? It is just about the image we want to project to his colleagues. I cannot have my awkward older sister standing in the corner making my fiancé's high-powered boss feel uncomfortable. Not personal. The phrase hung heavily there in the air between us. She had taken my love, my incredibly valuable time, my professional talent, and thrown it all straight back in my face because she thought I was some kind of social liability to her new country club lifestyle. My blood ran completely cold. The image of her standing in the beautiful, magical space I had painstakingly created for her, feeling actively ashamed of my presence. It was a wound deeper than any I had ever felt. I see, I said. My voice was completely empty of all emotion. I had locked it all away. Well, Jolene. I truly hope your party is everything you want it to be. I ended the call before she could say another word. I walked over to the fridge, pulled out some leftover chicken, and ate it cold over the sink. I did not shed a single tear. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. You would think after those 2 horrific phone calls, things could not possibly get any worse. You would think my family might just leave me alone to lick my wounds in peace. But if you thought that, you do not know my family. 3 days went by. 3 incredibly long days of me just going through the daily motions. I would wake up, make my coffee, drive to the firm, stare blankly at the extensive plans for Jolene's party on my monitor, and feel absolutely nothing. The joy of creation was completely gone, replaced by a hollow, echoing ache. I stopped making confirmation calls to the vendors. I just stopped. I told myself I needed time to process, but really, I was emotionally paralyzed. Then, on Friday afternoon, right before I was about to pack up and go home, my dad called. Archibald is a man who thinks of everything in life in terms of debits and credits. He is a senior accountant, and his entire worldview is basically one giant, unfeeling spreadsheet. He does not do emotions. He does transactions. Francine, he started loudly. There was no preamble. No, hello, how are you holding up? We need to talk about the engagement gift. I literally froze, my pen hovering motionless over a printed blueprint. The gift, he said, his tone brisk and all business. Your mother and I have been discussing it, and we have decided that a significant cash contribution would be the most appropriate gesture for you to make. Jolene and Desmond are planning a luxury, 3-week honeymoon to the Amalfi Coast in Italy, and we think $5,000 from you would be a suitable amount. It is your duty as the older, established sister. I almost laughed out loud. A bitter, ugly, sharp sound escaped my throat. I leaned back in my office chair, the leather creaking loudly in the quiet room. Let me make sure I am getting this completely straight, I said, my voice dripping with an icy, terrifying calm I did not even know I possessed. You want me to write a check to my sister for $5,000, for a party that I am expressly forbidden from attending? Do not be dramatic, Francine, he scoffed through the phone, exactly as if I were a spoiled teenager throwing a temper tantrum over a curfew. This is not about the party. This is about your family responsibility. It is about showing financial support. Your sister is starting a brand new life with a very promising young man. This is your part to play. We all have a part to play. I thought about the small inheritance my grandmother had left me a few years back. It was not a massive fortune, but it was enough to give me a little security, and my parents knew all about it. They also knew about my recent promotion. The timing of this ridiculous request felt entirely predatory. It was not just a gift they were asking for. It was a financial obligation they were trying to enforce by force. Dad, I said, my voice completely flat and devoid of warmth. I have done my part. I have given 3 solid months of my life. I have given them my professional design expertise, which would have cost them a 5-figure sum on the open market. And I have already spent my own money on their non-refundable vendor deposits. My part is absolutely done. I am not giving them one single dime more. His voice hardened instantly into a block of ice. I am very disappointed in you, Francine. This is incredibly selfish. After everything we have done for you, supporting your career choice, this is exactly how you repay us? By being petty and cheap? He hung up. Just like that. It was not a negotiation. It was a royal demand, and I had failed to comply. I was not just the socially embarrassing sister anymore. I was now the ungrateful, selfish, stingy daughter. The weight of it all was physically crushing. They were not just pushing me out of the picture. They were actively trying to squeeze every last drop of value out of me before they slammed the door. Later that weekend, on a quiet Sunday evening, I was doing laundry. Just normal, mundane chores to keep my mind from spiraling. I was sitting on my sofa, waiting for the dryer to finish, trying to lose myself in some mindless scrolling on my phone. Anything to numb the constant, agonizing replay of those 3 conversations in my head. And that is exactly when I saw it. A brand new Instagram post from my younger cousin, Cordelia. The photo was a large group shot of them. They were all grinning brightly, dressed to the nines, raising expensive champagne glasses under the trendy, neon pink lights of a bar called the Starlight Lounge. Right in the center was Jolene, looking radiant and smug in a tight white dress. Right beside her was Desmond, his arm wrapped possessively around her waist, and surrounding them were a dozen of their wealthy, high-status friends. The caption read, "Celebrating our beautiful bride-to-be. Best bachelorette party kickoff ever. Love you so much, Jolene and Desmond." My stomach plummeted straight down to the floorboards. I felt physically sick. Not only was I officially uninvited from the main engagement party, but I had been systematically erased from everything. Every pre-celebration. Every toast. Every single moment leading up to the wedding. But the absolute worst part, the part that felt like a knife twisting in my gut, was the location. The Starlight Lounge. It was a brand new, highly exclusive, members-only rooftop bar that was nearly impossible to get a table at without a 3-month waitlist. I had personally used my professional architectural connections, pulled major strings with the owner, who was a former, very happy client of mine, just to get them a VIP reservation. Jolene had told me it was going to be a small, intimate dinner with her bridesmaids. Getting them that table was supposed to be my special pre-wedding gift to her. And she had taken it. She used my name to get past the velvet rope, used my goodwill, and then held the massive party without inviting me. Every single smiling face in that photograph felt like a sharp, intentional, personal betrayal. I set my phone down on the coffee table. I rubbed my temples, my fingers trembling slightly. I picked the phone back up and sent Cordelia a very quick, simple direct message. "Hey. Saw your post. Looks like a really fun night. Was I supposed to be there?" Her reply came back almost instantly. Its casual, thoughtless cruelty literally took my breath away. "Oh hey Francine. It was just a last-minute thing, you know? Did not think you would care. Did not think I would care." I closed the app. I locked the screen. The phone felt incredibly heavy and freezing cold in my hand. They did not just not want me there. They had completely, genuinely forgotten I even existed. Or worse, they just did not care at all. I was a tool. A wrench in the toolbox to be used for my professional skills, my VIP connections, my hard-earned money, and then casually discarded back into the dark when I was no longer aesthetically convenient for their photos. The very last tiny bit of hope I had clinging to my heart, the hope that this was all just some horrible, stressful wedding misunderstanding, completely evaporated. This was highly intentional. This was systematic. And I was officially done being their family doormat. The next morning, Monday, I woke up feeling like I had a massive, splitting hangover, but I had not touched a single drop of alcohol all weekend. It was pure emotional exhaustion. The kind of deep, bone-weary fatigue that settles deep into your muscles and makes lifting your arms to brush your hair feel like a monumental, impossible task. I knew I could not just stay locked in my dark apartment, stewing in this highly toxic mix of anger, betrayal, and hurt. I needed to get out. I needed to talk to someone who was actually, genuinely on my side. So, I grabbed my keys and called my best friend, Wallace. Wallace has been my absolute rock since our freshman year of college. He is a freelance investigative journalist. He is incredibly sharp, a bit naturally cynical, and fiercely, terrifyingly loyal to the people he loves. If my family was a cold, bitter front of harsh judgment, Wallace was a warm, roaring bonfire of righteous indignation. We agreed to meet at our usual spot, a slightly worn-down, indie coffee shop halfway between our two apartments. It always smelled strongly of dark roasted espresso beans and old paperback books. I walked in, the bell above the door chiming lightly, and spotted him in our usual corner booth. I slid into the cracked vinyl seat across from him. I dropped the thick, heavy manila folder of party documents, contracts, and blueprints onto the wooden table with a loud, definitive thud. And then, I just let it all out. I told him everything. I told him about the sterile text message from Jolene. I told him about the maddening phone call with my mother playing the victim card. I told him about Jolene's cruel words about my career being an embarrassment. I told him about my dad's audacious demand for $5,000 of my inheritance money. I even pulled out my phone and showed him the Instagram post from the Starlight Lounge. I spoke for 20 minutes straight, my voice low and steady, but fueled by a white-hot, burning anger that had been simmering for almost a week. Wallace just listened. He did not interrupt me once. He did not offer empty platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing sharply as he sipped his black coffee. When I finally finished speaking, the whole sordid, ugly tale hanging heavily in the air between us, he set his mug down carefully. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his expression incredibly grim. "Francine," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "I am going to ask you a question, and I want you to be totally, brutally honest with yourself. Why are you still doing any of this? Why have you not burned that entire folder in a dumpster and walked away?" I hesitated. I looked down at my hands. The thought had crossed my mind, of course, during the dark hours of the night, but it felt incredibly drastic. Unthinkable. "They are my family, Wallace," I mumbled, even though the words tasted like dry ash in my mouth. "You do not just walk away from family." "The hell you do not," he shot back immediately, his voice rising a little in volume, causing a woman typing on a laptop at the next table to glance over at us. "Listen to me. If this was a toxic marriage, you would have hired a ruthless divorce lawyer by now. They walked away from you. They used you, they insulted your life's work, they humiliated you publicly, and then they tried to bill you for the privilege. That is not family, Francine. That is a toxic waste dump." I sat there, absorbing his words. They stung, but only because they were completely true. Wallace jabbed a finger aggressively at the thick manila folder resting on the table between us. "Open it up. Go on. Open the damn folder." I reached out and reluctantly flipped open the cover. Inside were neat stacks of papers. Copies of all the vendor agreements, the detailed work orders, the catering confirmations, the venue layouts. My careful, precise architectural handwriting was in the margins of every single page. "Look at those papers," Wallace instructed, his eyes boring directly into mine. "Whose name is actually on those contracts?" I blinked, confused for a second. "What do you mean?" "I mean, who is legally, personally, and professionally liable if a vendor does not get paid on the day of the event? Who did Mr. Ortiz at the venue and Mrs. Morgan at the catering company actually make their legally binding agreements with?" I looked down at the paperwork. I looked at the signature lines. A slow, massive, earth-shattering realization began to dawn on me. The thick fog of hurt and obligation in my brain started to rapidly clear, replaced by cold, hard facts. "Me," I whispered, tracing my finger over my signature. "My name is on all of them." "Exactly," Wallace said, a grim, highly satisfied smile finally playing on his lips. "You are sitting here crying into your coffee, feeling completely powerless, acting like they hold all the cards and you are just a victim. But you are wrong, Francine. You have been so busy trying to prove you are worthy of their conditional love that you have not realized one massive, crucial thing." He leaned in even closer across the small table. "You hold absolutely all the power here. You built this entire event from the ground up. You are the structural foundation. And what happens when you pull the foundation out from under a house?" I stared at him. I said the words, feeling a thrilling, terrifying shiver run straight down my spine. "It collapses. It collapses," he repeated, nodding slowly, his eyes shining. "You do not owe them a single thing. You do not have to scream, or fight, or beg for a seat at a table that you bought and paid for. You just stop. You legally and professionally step back, and you let them deal with the massive mess they created. His words were like a heavy brass key turning in a rusted lock I did not even know was inside me. I was not just the uninvited, embarrassing older sister. I was the project manager. The sole point of contact. The architect of the entire evening. Without me, it was not just a party missing a guest. It was a massive, highly complicated logistical project without a leader. I looked down at my name again, signed in black ink on a heavy contract with the rooftop venue. Francine Marshall. It looked completely different to me now. It looked stronger. It looked like leverage. I looked up at Wallace, and for the first time in an entire week, I felt a genuine smile touch my lips. It was a very cold, very calculated smile. I felt like a lawyer who just found the winning loophole in a massive case. Leaving that coffee shop, I felt like an entirely different human being. The crushing, suffocating weight that had been pressing down on my chest for days was completely gone. It was replaced by a massive surge of pure adrenaline and a chilling, crystal-clear sense of purpose. I walked back to my car, and then drove back to my office, not with the slumped, defeated shoulders of a victim, but with the determined, rapid stride of a woman on a serious mission. Wallace had not just given me good advice as a friend. He had given me permission to fight back in the absolute only way that would truly, deeply matter to people like my family. The logistical way. I marched into my office, shut the heavy glass door firmly behind me, and sat down at my desk. The afternoon light was casting long shadows across the room again, just like the day I got the text. But this time I was in control. I did not hesitate for a single second. I pulled up my professional email account, my fingers flying rapidly across the keyboard. I drafted 3 separate, distinct, highly formal emails. One for Mr. Ortiz at the venue. One for Mrs. Morgan for the catering. And one for Brian Walsh, the floral decorator. The exact wording of these emails was absolutely crucial. I kept it strictly professional, exceptionally polite, and devastatingly final. I channeled every bit of corporate speak I had learned over my career. Dear Mr. Ortiz, I wrote. Please be advised that effective immediately, I will be formally stepping back from my role as the planner and primary contact for the Marshall engagement party scheduled for the 21st. Due to unforeseen personal circumstances, I am no longer involved with the management or execution of this event. All future communications, logistical questions, layout decisions, and final payment confirmations will need to be directed immediately to my sister, Miss Jolene Marshall. Her direct contact information is attached below. Thank you for your continued understanding and professionalism. Sincerely, Francine Marshall, Lead Architect. I copied and pasted the exact same basic, airtight template for the other 2 vendors, changing only the names and specific service details. I did not offer any dramatic family explanations. I did not apologize for the inconvenience. I simply and cleanly severed the professional ties. It was like performing precision surgery to entirely remove a toxic growth from my life. I attached Jolene's personal cell phone number and her email address to every single one. Let her deal with the dusty details. My finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. I knew exactly what this meant. This was it. There was absolutely no going back after this button was pressed. I took a deep, steadying breath, and I clicked send. 1, 2, 3. Done. The silence in my office afterwards was profound. It was the beautiful silence of a finished chapter. It did not take long at all. Within 15 minutes, my office desk phone rang loudly. It was Mrs. Morgan, the caterer. I picked it up. Her voice was laced with deep, frantic concern. Francine, honey, I just got your email. Is everything all right? You are the only one who knows the exact timeline for the hot appetizers to come out. Your sister has not been involved in any of the tasting meetings. She will not know what to do when the kitchen asks for the cue. I am completely sure she will figure it out, Mrs. Morgan, I said, my voice completely calm and even. Thank you so much for your concern, but my decision to step back is final. Please direct all questions to Jolene moving forward. Next, my cell phone buzzed with a frantic text from Brian Walsh, the florist. Francine, you cannot possibly be serious right now. Who is going to supervise the rigging for the floral chandelier installation? I need an engineer to sign off on the weight load. Also, your sister texted me yesterday and thought peonies grew natively in Tennessee in October. We are going to have a disaster. I read the text, smiled slightly, and deliberately did not reply to Brian. The most telling response, however, came from Mr. Ortiz. He was a man of very few words, all business, but his email reply was crystal clear regarding liability. Ms. Marshall, your name is on the signed contract for the initial booking and a security deposit. I trust the client, Jolene Marshall, is fully prepared to handle the final massive payments and provide on-site management for the duration of the event. If not, the event will be halted. I replied simply, typing the words with immense satisfaction. Mr. Ortiz, I have fully fulfilled my design and initial booking obligations. The financial execution and physical management are now entirely in the hands of the client. I have every confidence they will manage it according to their high standards. It was a total, absolute bluff, of course. I had zero confidence they could manage a child's birthday party, let alone a 200-person luxury event. But my name on the contract was only legally binding for the initial booking and the deposit, which I had already paid and was willing to eat the cost of. The final, massive payment due on the day of the event, and the actual on-site disaster management, were now entirely Jolene and Desmond's problem. With the logistical time bomb securely set, ticking away quietly in the background, I moved on to the final, most important phase of my new plan. I opened a new browser tab on my computer monitor and typed in the words, "Flights to Hawaii." For weeks, the idea had just been a fantasy. A fleeting, desperate thought of escape when I was feeling particularly exhausted or sorry for myself. Now, it was going to be my absolute, undeniable reality. I was not just stepping back from their party to sit in my apartment and cry. I was removing myself from the blast zone entirely. I searched through the airlines and found a direct, first-class flight from Nashville to Honolulu. It departed at exactly 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. The exact morning of the engagement party. The timing was poetically, beautifully perfect. I pictured myself sitting in a wide, comfortable airplane seat, climbing high above the thick clouds, drinking a cold mimosa and watching a movie. Meanwhile, thousands of feet down below on solid ground, my sister, my mother, and my father were about to discover exactly what happens when you take the architect of your life for granted and tell her she is an embarrassment. I entered my credit card information. My heart was pounding with a wild, intoxicating mixture of slight fear and massive exhilaration. My finger hovered over the bright green "Confirm Purchase" button on the screen. This was so much more than just a tropical vacation. This was a massive statement. This was me actively choosing myself over a family that viewed me as an ATM and a servant. This was me choosing my sanity. Choosing my freedom. Choosing peace. I pressed down on the mouse. I clicked confirm. The screen buffered for a second, and then the confirmation page loaded brightly. The email with my flight itinerary pinged loudly in my inbox. It was done. It was real. I was going to Hawaii. I leaned all the way back in my heavy leather office chair, closed my eyes, and let out a long, slow breath that I felt like I had been holding tightly in my lungs for 3 solid months. The heavy, suffocating strings of familial obligation had been completely, surgically cut. I was finally, truly free. And the best part? They had absolutely no idea the storm that was heading straight for their perfect, high-status party. The evening before the party, the evening before my flight, I was in my apartment packing my bags. The entire process was methodical, almost meditative in a way I had not experienced in years. I pulled my sturdy, hard-shell suitcase from the hall closet and laid it open on my bed. I laid out a few pairs of crisp linen shorts, some light, breathable cotton shirts, and my favorite swimsuits. I packed a thick, heavy hardcover novel I had been meaning to read for months but never had the time for because I was always working on Jolene's blueprints. It felt incredibly surreal, carefully packing for a tropical paradise while a massive, destructive storm of my own careful making was about to break over my family. I folded a soft blue shirt and placed it precisely in the corner of my suitcase. As I smoothed down the fabric, my cell phone buzzed loudly against the wooden nightstand. I did not flinch. I just slowly turned my head and glanced over at the glowing screen. It was a text from my mom, Loretta. "Francine, your father tells me you still have not sent the gift money. Do not be so incredibly selfish. This is for your sister." I stood there in my quiet bedroom and just stared at the message. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of it was almost impressive. Even now, after everything they had said, after kicking me out of the event, their primary concern was still the money. They truly viewed my inheritance and my salary as a community chest they had full custody over. Not my hurt feelings, not my sudden absence from family life, just the financial check they felt they were rightfully owed. A month ago, a text like that from my mother would have sent me into a terrible spiral of guilt, anxiety, and defensive anger. I would have agonized over how to reply. Now, looking at those words, I felt absolutely nothing. It was exactly like reading a misdirected message meant for a complete stranger. I picked up the phone, held my finger down on the message bubble, and without a single second of hesitation, I deleted it. I did not even bother to block her number yet. I wanted them to have a clear way to reach me when the absolute panic set in tomorrow. It was a cold, cruel thought, maybe, but it felt like pure justice. I continued packing. I zipped up the suitcase, the metallic sound ringing out decisive and final in the quiet apartment. I walked over to my home office desk and looked at the corner where the massive manila folder for Jolene's party used to sit. Earlier that day, I had taken it to my firm and filed it away in a deep, locking cabinet drawer, buried under years of old, completed commercial projects. It was a highly physical act of putting the past behind me. I walked into my living room and stood by my large window, looking out at the Nashville skyline. The lights of the city were just starting to twinkle to life against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, on a highly exclusive rooftop I knew intimately, final preparations were supposedly underway for a massive, expensive party. I wondered what it looked like right at that exact moment. Was it the elegant, magical space I had painstakingly designed, or was it already showing the obvious signs of structural neglect? I walked over to my bar cart and poured myself a small glass of expensive Kentucky bourbon, the rich amber liquid catching the low light of my living room lamp. I raised the heavy crystal glass to the window in a silent, solitary toast. It was not a toast to their impending failure. Not really. It was a deep, meaningful toast to my new freedom. To choosing personal peace over toxic, draining family obligation. It was a toast to the simple, profound act of walking away from people who fundamentally refuse to see your worth. I took a slow sip. The bourbon was warm and incredibly smooth, burning slightly in a good way, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a genuine, deeply rooted sense of peace settle over my shoulders. The absolute chaos would come tomorrow. The angry calls, the frantic texts, the wild accusations. But they would not find me. By the time their perfect, curated world started to crumble, I would be 30,000 feet in the air, heading west towards the sunrise and a brand new beginning. And they would be left to stand alone in the ruins of a party they demanded, but a family they had so carelessly thrown away. The alarm on my phone went off at 4 in the morning. I did not hit snooze. I woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed, my mind completely clear. I took a quick, hot shower, dressed in my comfortable travel clothes, and ordered an Uber to the Nashville International Airport. While all of the impending disaster was quietly unfolding back in my city, I was blissfully unaware, sitting in the sterile, bright quiet of the airport terminal. It was roughly 6:30 in the morning. The sun outside the massive glass windows was just a pale pink smear on the dark horizon, promising a beautiful day. I was sitting at my gate, sipping a lukewarm black coffee from a paper cup, just watching other travelers hurry past my seat. Their faces were a familiar mixture of vacation excitement and early morning exhaustion. My cell phone, which I had kept on silent mode but had not yet switched to airplane mode, lay face down on the empty vinyl seat directly beside me. I felt a very strange, almost out-of-body sense of detachment. It felt exactly like I was sitting in a dark theater, watching a movie of my own life play out on a screen. I knew the party preparations were supposed to be starting soon. I knew the logistical chaos was likely beginning to bubble up to the surface at the venue, but it all felt a million miles away from me. Around 6:45, just as the gate agent announced over the loudspeaker that pre-boarding for my flight to Honolulu would begin shortly, the phone vibrated against the seat. It was a single, sharp, jarring buzz. I picked it up and glanced at the bright screen. It was a text message from my mom, Loretta. "The party is a complete mess. Call me right now." The tone of her message was no longer chiding, condescending, or asking for my inheritance money. It was pure, unfiltered panic. I sat there in the airport terminal and just stared at the message, a cold, undeniable satisfaction spreading slowly through my chest. I did not type a reply. I did not even open the message to leave her unread. I just watched the screen dim and go dark. Exactly 1 minute later, the phone buzzed again. This time it was my dad, Archibald. "Francine, where are you? The caterer is saying the food order is completely wrong. Fix this. Fix this. Not please help us. Not we made a terrible mistake." It was a direct order, as if I were a disobedient employee who had missed a shift. The sheer arrogance of the man was simply stunning. He truly believed that even after kicking me out, he could just snap his fingers and I would come running to clean up their messes. I took another sip of my lukewarm coffee. It tasted like absolute victory. Then, the floodgates completely opened. The phone began to vibrate continuously, performing a frantic, desperate dance on the blue vinyl seat next to me. It was a digital barrage, an absolute assault of notifications. A text from Jolene popped up. "Francine, where are you? The flowers are wrong. Everything is wrong." Another rapid text from Jolene. "Mr. Ortiz is looking for you. Everyone is asking for you. You have to come here right now." And another, arriving seconds later. "I am sorry. Okay? I am sorry. Just please, please come and fix this. I am begging you." The all-caps lettering, the frantic, erratic punctuation. I could almost hear the shrill, terrified panic in her voice through the screen. It was the exact sound of a spoiled, entitled child who had finally broken her favorite, expensive toy and realized, to her absolute horror, that no one was going to buy her a new one. Then the actual phone call started. My mom's face popped up brightly on the screen. I pressed the button on the side to silence it. Then my dad called. Silenced. Then Jolene, over and over and over again. I watched her glamorous profile picture appear and disappear on my screen. Her smug smile in the photo was a bitter, perfect irony. I pictured her, right at that moment, probably standing in the middle of her own personal nightmare, frantically jabbing at her phone, her perfectly manicured acrylic nails clicking uselessly on the glass screen. A string of aggressive texts from my dad came through in quick, rapid succession. "This is your responsibility. You signed the venue contract. You are embarrassing this family in front of Desmond's colleagues. I am ordering you to get down here and salvage this situation." I actually had to laugh out loud at that one, drawing a strange look from a businessman sitting across from me. Ordering me? He had absolutely no idea I was sitting less than 50 feet from a boarding gate that would take me thousands of miles away from his pathetic orders and his constant disappointment. The friendly voice of the gate agent came over the loudspeaker, announcing that my boarding group was welcome to step forward. I stood up slowly, smoothing out my clothes, and grabbed the handle of my carry-on bag. The phone in my hand was still vibrating, a constant, buzzing testament to their sheer desperation. It felt like a beautiful symphony of consequences. As I walked confidently towards the gate, handing my boarding pass to the agent, one last text came through and illuminated the screen. It was from Jolene. "You have ruined my life. I hate you." I stopped for a single second, right before stepping onto the jet bridge. I looked down at the hateful message. A week ago, those exact words from my little sister would have completely shattered me. They would have felt like a mortal, bleeding wound. But right now, in this moment, they were just meaningless pixels on a screen. It was the pathetic, last-gasp tantrum of a toxic person who was finally facing the massive fallout of her own cruelty. I did not feel hatred back. I did not feel a need for petty revenge. I did not feel anything at all, just a vast, peaceful emptiness. The absolute emptiness of a space where a family used to be. I looked up, smiled warmly at the flight attendant welcoming me aboard, and walked down the jet bridge. As I settled into my wide, comfortable seat and fastened my seatbelt, I took my phone out one last time. I held the power button down and watched it power off completely. The screen went completely dark, and the frantic, anxious buzzing finally, blissfully stopped. I was done. The terrible show was officially over, and I was leaving the massive cleanup entirely to them. If you've made it this far, please do me a favor, like the video and comment number 1 down below. It lets me know how awesome you are and shows that you're right here with me on this journey. Your support is a massive encouragement and truly motivates me. Drop that one so I can recognize you, and now, let's get back to my story. Landing in Honolulu, Hawaii was exactly like stepping through a portal into another, far better world. The air outside the airport was incredibly warm and thick, heavily perfumed with the lush smell of sea salt, plumeria, and hibiscus flowers. As I took the shuttle bus to my boutique hotel in Waikiki, watching the vibrant green mountains pass by the window, I kept my phone strictly powered off. I did not want to know what was happening back in Nashville. That was the old, heavy world. This was the new one. For 3 glorious, uninterrupted days, I lived in a state of absolute, blissful ignorance. I checked into a beautiful, small hotel with a private balcony directly overlooking the impossibly blue waters of the Pacific Ocean. I unpacked my clothes, putting away my heavy thoughts along with my empty suitcase. I spent my quiet mornings just walking barefoot on the soft, white sand beach, letting the warm, gentle water wash over my ankles. I could physically feel the deep, knotted tension of the last few months literally dissolving into the vast ocean. I ate fresh, spicy poke bowls from a colorful local food truck parked near the beach. I read my thick novel under the cool, swaying shade of a massive palm tree. I just breathed. For the first time in a very long time, I was not Francine the stressed commercial architect. I was not the unappreciated daughter, or the embarrassing sister. I was just me, and it was absolutely wonderful. I started to feel the deep, festering wounds of anger and hurt slowly begin to scab over. The pain was not completely gone, of course, but it was finally manageable. I sat on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold, and I thought to myself, okay, this is it. I have survived this terrible ordeal. I have made my point clearly. Now I can just heal and gracefully move on with my life. But my family, as I would very soon learn, was absolutely not done with me yet. Of course, I was not there to see the massive implosion of the engagement party myself. I was flying somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. But I pieced the entire disastrous timeline together later from a few very reliable sources. I received a highly apologetic and incredibly detailed professional email from Mr. Ortiz, a long, rambling, distressed voicemail from Mrs. Morgan, and a few incredibly juicy, undeniable tidbits that Wallace managed to pick up through his extensive journalistic connections. So, as I sat on a beautiful beach in Waikiki a few days later, safely insulated by distance, this is the vivid, catastrophic picture I put together of that Saturday evening. The utter chaos apparently started very early in the afternoon. Jolene, in her infinite arrogance, fully believed that the massive event would simply magically run itself based on my detailed blueprints and planning. Because of this, she did not even arrive at the venue until 1 short hour before the guests were scheduled to walk through the doors. She showed up, not to supervise the intricate setup, but simply to sit in the bridal suite and get her hair and expensive makeup touched up by a professional team. Desmond, her wonderful fiancé, was even worse. He was at a loud sports bar down the street with his groomsmen, pre-gaming heavily, as he reportedly called it. Mr. Ortiz, the strict venue manager, was the very first person to realize something was terribly, fundamentally wrong. He had my exact, minute-by-minute timeline, which called for a final, crucial sound check at 4 in the afternoon and a complex lighting check at 5. But with absolutely no project manager there to direct the hired technicians, they were just standing around the venue, looking confused and refusing to touch the expensive equipment. The custom, massive floral chandelier, the literal centerpiece of my entire design vision, was still sitting in pieces on the hardwood floor. Brian Walsh, the decorator, was furious because he had no authorized person to legally sign off on the structural rigging. He tried calling Jolene repeatedly. No answer. He tried calling Desmond. It went straight to a full voicemail box. When the high-status guests, Desmond's wealthy colleagues and their wives, started to arrive right at 6 o'clock, they walked directly into a scene of low-grade, visible panic. Half the tables were entirely missing their centerpieces. The elegant, rustic chic vibe I had meticulously planned was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Brian, in a highly desperate, last-minute attempt to fill the massive, empty space before he left in disgust, had literally put out a few sad-looking, cheap helium balloons that completely clashed with the entire color scheme. Guests were reportedly whispering behind their hands, looking around the room with highly confused, uncomfortable expressions. Then came the absolute food disaster. Mrs. Morgan, the caterer, was a consummate, experienced professional, but she could only work with the exact information and budget she was given. A week prior, right after I had formally stepped back, Desmond had called her directly. In an attempt to save face and money, he had made several severe, cost-saving changes to my curated menu without consulting Jolene, or apparently anyone with functioning taste buds. He completely swapped out the highly popular, gourmet hot chicken sliders for cold, cheap, pre-made pinwheel sandwiches. He completely cancelled the interactive shrimp and grit station just to save money on hiring an on-site chef. The resulting presentation was a sad, limp, unappetizing buffet that looked vastly more appropriate for a depressing corporate lunch meeting than a high-end luxury engagement party. Mrs. Morgan told me later she desperately tried to reason with him, but he arrogantly insisted he knew best, claiming he wanted a more modern, minimalist menu. The guests were absolutely not impressed. The specific word tacky was reportedly overheard by the waitstaff more than once. The absolute breaking point, the exact moment the entire evening curdled from deeply awkward to historically catastrophic, happened around 7:30. Jolene finally emerged from her bridal suite, expecting to be greeted by applause in a magical wonderland. Seeing the actual, horrific state of her party for the very first time, she reportedly let out a loud, piercing shriek of pure horror. She marched aggressively over to the sad-looking buffet, picked up a limp pinwheel sandwich with 2 fingers exactly as if it were a dead, rotting insect, and turned sharply to find Desmond. She found him standing by the bar, laughing loudly and drunkenly with his friends. According to a source Wallace spoke to who was standing right nearby, the resulting confrontation was loud, incredibly public, and utterly, unforgettably mortifying. "What is this?" Jolene screeched loudly, literally shoving the cheap sandwich toward his face. "This is my engagement party, and it looks like a cheap funeral." Desmond, his face flushing red from cheap alcohol and sudden, defensive anger, shot right back. "Well, maybe if your completely useless sister had not bailed on us, things would be different." "My sister," she yelled, her shrill voice echoing terribly across the silent rooftop. "You are the one who specifically told me to uninvite her." You said she was an embarrassment to your friends and that you could handle everything yourself. I could have if you were not so incredibly busy getting your stupid picture taken, he snarled back, throwing his drink down. This is your fault, Jolene. You and your stupid, highly dramatic family. They stood there, the so-called perfect, happy couple, viciously screaming insults at each other in front of all their friends, family, and Desmond's highly conservative, powerful boss. The party came to a dead standstill. The background music faded out. Everyone just stood holding their drinks, staring as the perfect, wealthy facade they had tried so desperately hard to build completely crumbled into dust right before their very eyes. Guests started to quickly and quietly slip away toward the elevators. Mr. Ortiz, thoroughly disgusted, began directing his staff to start cleaning up the room early. Even though the party was technically supposed to go on for another 3 hours, the beautiful, magical evening I had designed had rapidly become a massive public spectacle of failure, incompetence, and deep humiliation. And the architects of that failure had absolutely no one to blame but themselves. On the 4th day of my Hawaiian escape, I was sitting peacefully on my balcony, drinking a fresh cup of Kona coffee and watching the local surfers expertly ride the morning waves. I felt rested. I felt completely detached from the drama. So, I finally decided to turn my cell phone back on. I was fully expecting a massive flood of angry voicemails and unhinged texts from my parents. I was mentally prepared for that kind of tantrum. What I was absolutely not prepared for was the urgent, terrifying message from Wallace. It was not just a text message. It was a clear screenshot of a highly public post from a massive Facebook group called the Nashville Community Forum. The author of the post was my sister, Jolene. My blood ran completely cold as I zoomed in and read the text. Her profile picture showed her looking incredibly sad, demure, and innocent. The post itself was an absolute, terrifying masterpiece of dark manipulation and outright, malicious lies. I need to share a very painful, personal story as a serious warning to others in our local community, she began. As many of you know, my fiancé and I recently hosted our engagement party. Unfortunately, the event was brutally sabotaged from the inside by my own sister, Francine Marshall of Marshall Commercial Designs. My jaw dropped. She had used my full legal name and my professional business name. For months, we truly believed she was helping us, but it seems she was silently suffering from a severe mental health crisis, deeply fueled by her toxic jealousy over my happiness and my relationship, the post continued. She deliberately messed up our vendor orders, gave the caterers the completely wrong information, and then literally disappeared on the morning of the event just to watch it all burn down. It was a highly malicious, calculated act that has left my family entirely heartbroken and my professional, social reputation in tatters. She finished with a final, sickening plea. I am sharing this because I do not want another family or bride to go through what we have endured. Please be incredibly cautious when dealing with her or her firm. We are praying she gets the psychiatric help she so desperately needs. I had to read the screenshot 3 times to fully absorb the pure venom. Sabotaged? Mental health crisis? Jealousy? She had taken the massive disaster she created through her own sheer negligence, and brilliantly twisted it. She was painting me as an unstable, vindictive monster, and painting herself as the poor, deeply innocent victim. My hand started shaking violently. This was not just a petty family squabble anymore. She had publicly used my name. She had posted this massive lie in a public community forum with over 50,000 active local members. This was a public execution of my personal character and my entire professional career. I scrolled down through the screenshot to read the comments, my stomach churning violently. There were hundreds of them. So incredibly sorry you went through this, Jolene. Sending prayers. What an absolute monster. I will be sure to never, ever use Marshall Designs. Thank you for your bravery in sharing this warning. I hope your sister gets locked up in a ward. It was a modern-day witch hunt, and I was tied firmly to the stake. She had taken my quiet, peaceful act of self-preservation and maliciously turned it into a public, career-ending smear campaign. The peaceful, tropical bubble I had built around myself in Hawaii burst instantly into a million pieces. The anger came roaring back, vastly hotter and far more intense than before. This was no longer just about a stupid rooftop party. This was about my livelihood. My hard-earned reputation. My salary. My entire future as an architect. She was not content with just pushing me out of her life. She was actively trying to burn my entire world completely to the ground. Right as I was pacing the balcony, my phone buzzed again. It was an incoming email to my professional work account. The subject line read, "Cancellation of consultation." It was from a potential new corporate client, a massive firm I had been incredibly excited to pitch a design to. The email was painfully short and freezing cold. Ms. Marshall, in light of some highly disturbing information that has recently come to our attention regarding your professional conduct and stability, we will be permanently canceling our upcoming meeting. We wish you the best. The best. I felt a massive wave of nausea hit me. She was actually succeeding. Her vicious lies were spreading rapidly through the Nashville corporate grapevine, and the financial damage was already being done. The beautiful paradise around me, the clear blue sky, the gentle ocean waves, the warm tropical breeze, suddenly felt exactly like a prison cage. I was thousands of miles away, completely, physically powerless, while my sister was systematically destroying my life from behind her keyboard. My very first instinct was pure, unadulterated panic. I desperately wanted to book the next flight back to Nashville immediately, march right into that community forum, and scream the truth at everyone. But I knew, deep down, that acting emotional would only make me look more unhinged. It would play perfectly right into Jolene's fake narrative about my mental health crisis. I felt totally trapped, my solid reputation being shredded by lies while I sat helpless on a rock in the ocean. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial the numbers, but I managed to call the one single person I knew would be in my corner. I called Wallace. "Wallace," I said, my voice cracking slightly as soon as he answered the phone. "You are not going to believe what she has done to me." "I have already seen it, Francine," he said. His voice was incredibly grim but perfectly steady. "I have been watching that forum thread blow up all morning. Do not respond to her. Do not engage in the comments. Do not do a single thing until we talk. This is exactly what she wants. She desperately wants you to have a highly public meltdown to prove her right." Wallace's absolute calmness was the heavy anchor I desperately needed in that storm. He was totally right. A frantic, highly emotional, screaming response was a losing game. This was absolutely not a messy family fight anymore. This was a public relations war, and I was going to need a ruthless strategy. "What do I do, Wallace?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. "She is telling thousands of people I am mentally ill. She is literally ruining my business. I just lost a major client." "We fight back," he said simply. And I could hear the fierce, journalistic determination burning in his voice. "We do not fight with emotion. We fight with facts. Cold, hard, undeniable, verifiable facts. You act like a lawyer building an airtight case. You are the architect, right?" he continued. "You have the blueprints. You have the massive paper trail." Over the next 2 solid hours, we talked, planned, and strategized over the phone. Wallace, with his sharp, investigative journalist's brain, was highly methodical. He told me to go back through my laptop and pull every single email, every text message, every vendor invoice, every receipt related to that party. He wanted a complete, minute-by-minute timeline. He wanted concrete evidence. While I was doing that in Hawaii, he told me he was going to make a few phone calls of his own. He would not tell me exactly to whom, just that he had a few deep contacts in the local event industry who valued strict professionalism above all else. So, that is exactly what I did. I spent the rest of my beautiful day in Hawaii not sitting on the warm beach, but hunched intensely over my glowing laptop in my hotel room, acting like a forensic accountant. I compiled absolutely everything. I saved my initial design proposal to Jolene. I saved the countless emails meticulously confirming the details. I downloaded the bank statements showing the invoices I had paid straight out of my own pocket. I screenshotted the older texts where Jolene had highly praised my work, right before Desmond got in her ear. I even dug up the text where I had sent her the VIP reservation details for the Starlight Lounge. It was an absolute mountain of undeniable, time-stamped evidence that proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had been nothing but a highly dedicated professional and a loving sister. I zipped the entire massive file, labeled it clearly the truth, and emailed it straight to Wallace. Meanwhile, back in Nashville, Wallace was actively working his absolute magic. He reached out formally to Mr. Ortiz, Mrs. Morgan, and Brian Walsh. He introduced himself not as my friend, but as a freelance investigative journalist working on a prominent story about the state of event planning and client relations in Nashville. He did not even have to mention my specific name at first. He just casually asked them about their recent professional experience dealing with the Marshall engagement party. He called me back later that evening. "It is way better than I thought," he said, a sharp note of pure triumph in his voice. "They are all absolutely furious. Not at you, Francine. At your sister and her idiot fiancé. They felt their own professional, hard-earned reputations were deeply tarnished by that absolute disaster of an event. They are more than willing to talk to me, as long as I keep their exact names out of it to avoid a messy defamation lawsuit." Mr. Ortiz had apparently told Wallace on the record, Francine Marshall's plans were meticulous and flawless. The failure of that event was a catastrophic, textbook failure of on-site management by the client. Mrs. Morgan had detailed exactly how Desmond had rudely overridden her professional culinary recommendations and arrogantly insisted on the cheaper, terrible food to save a few bucks. Brian Walsh had provided a screenshot of his long string of completely unanswered, frantic texts to Jolene from the afternoon of the party when the chandelier was grounded. Wallace spent the entire next day writing. He did not write a highly emotional, angry Facebook post. He wrote a highly polished, devastatingly professional, heavily researched article. He laid out the entire story, piece by piece. He did not frame it as a messy, petty family drama. He framed it as a serious business case study in professional integrity versus sheer client negligence. He seamlessly interwoven my mountain of evidence, the emails, the timelines, the receipts, with the anonymous, deeply damning testimony from the highly respected Nashville vendors. He painted a crystal-clear, undeniable picture of a highly dedicated, generous professional who was maliciously thrown under the bus by a narcissistic, incompetent client trying to cover up her own massive failures. The headline he chose was an absolute work of art. Nashville event disaster, how an architect's vision was derailed by her own family. He sent me the final draft to read. Reading it over my morning coffee, I felt a massive surge of pure hope. It was my complete truth, told in a way that was factually undeniable. We even had a mutual friend of ours who worked as a corporate lawyer give it a quick, thorough read to make absolutely sure we were not opening ourselves up to any counter-liability or slander claims. The lawyer gave it the complete green light. "Are you ready?" Wallace asked me over the phone, his finger hovering over the publish button. "Do it," I said, my voice completely steady and strong for the very first time in days. "Let's burn her disgusting lies to the ground." Wallace officially published the polished article on a highly popular, widely read local Nashville news blog that he frequently freelanced for. And then, we simply waited. The article landed on the internet like a massive, undeniable bomb. It spread rapidly through the Nashville social and corporate scene faster than juicy gossip at a hair salon. To ensure maximum impact, Wallace had logged into his own Facebook account and posted the direct link to the article squarely in the comments section of Jolene's original, viral post in the community forum. The effect was instantaneous, and it was absolutely devastating for her. Suddenly, the entire public narrative completely flipped. The massive tide of public sympathy, which had been so strongly in her favor just 24 hours ago, violently turned against her with an absolute vengeance. People started dissecting her original post, pointing out the highly manipulative language and the lack of proof. But the anonymous, deeply critical quotes from the highly respected Nashville vendors were the ultimate killing blow. Everyone in that scene knew exactly who the top florist and caterer were, even without their names. Jolene's fabricated story about a mentally unstable sister deliberately sabotaging her perfect party completely fell apart under the crushing weight of hard, undeniable, time-stamped evidence. The comments on her post turned from sweet and sympathetic to absolutely vicious. Wow. So you stiffed your sister, ruined your own party, and then tried to maliciously ruin her professional career? Pure class. I was actually at that party. It was a complete, humiliating disaster. Now I finally know why. Shame on you, Jolene Marshall. This is literal character assassination. I truly hope your sister hires a lawyer and sues you for defamation. By the time I finally flew back to Nashville a few days later, relaxed and tanned, the digital war was completely over. And Jolene had lost spectacularly. The very first thing I did upon landing was have my lawyer friend formally send Jolene a strict cease and desist letter regarding her highly defamatory public statements. Her fake Facebook post was deleted within the hour of her receiving it. But the real-world, tangible consequences of her actions were just beginning to unfold. Wallace happily kept me updated over drinks. The first massive domino to fall was the engagement itself. Apparently, the sheer, highly public humiliation of the article exposing their lies was the absolute final straw for Desmond. The horrible screaming match at the party had already exposed the deep cracks in their relationship, but my factual counteroffensive had shattered it completely. Desmond was a man deeply obsessed with his corporate image and his social status. And Jolene had just officially become a toxic social pariah in their circles. He called off the wedding entirely, telling their mutual friends that he simply could not be professionally or personally associated with that level of unhinged drama. The second domino was even more financially satisfying. Desmond's wealthy family, who were just as intensely image-conscious as he was, were utterly horrified by the whole public affair and the article. They had apparently been planning to formally invest a massive amount of money into a boutique clothing business that Jolene wanted to start after the wedding. After the article came out proving she was a liar and a terrible manager, and their son broke off the engagement, they pulled their financial funding completely. Jolene's entire dream of becoming a wealthy business owner, bankrolled entirely by her fiancé's parents, went up in smoke instantly. My own family desperately tried to do damage control, but it was far too late. My mother called me, leaving a long, rambling, highly tearful voicemail. "Francine, please, this has gone entirely too far," she cried into the phone. "Your sister is totally heartbroken. Desmond left her. You are tearing this family apart. You need to take that article down and stop this." Stop what? I had not done a single malicious thing. I had only defended my career and my livelihood with the truth. The absolute fact that she still viewed me as the aggressor in this situation told me absolutely everything I needed to know about her. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. My dad sent a very curt text. "We need to meet immediately. This public mess has affected my business connections." I did not reply. Their desperate attempts to guilt-trip and command me had permanently lost all of their power. The absolute most potent form of karma, however, came from the professional community. The true story of the party became a massive cautionary tale among Nashville's tight-knit event industry. The vendors I had worked with, who were now fiercely, intensely loyal to me after I had publicly vindicated them, quietly spread the word. The Marshall family, and Jolene in particular, became widely known as clients from hell. Absolutely no reputable florist, caterer, or planner in the city would touch them for future events. Their precious social standing, which they had tried so desperately hard to elevate by casting me out as an embarrassment, was now firmly lying in the gutter. I did not feel a huge rush of triumphant joy. I did not call them to gloat. What I felt was a profound, deep sense of total relief. A quiet, deep satisfaction. It was the exact feeling of a massive weight being lifted off my chest, of a skewed, unfair world finally righting itself. I had weathered their terrible storm. I had stood my ground, armed with absolutely nothing but the truth, and I had won my life back. I had not actively sought revenge. Not really. I had simply, firmly demanded basic respect. And in the very end, the world had given it to me, while the people who tried to deny me that respect were left with nothing but the deeply bitter taste of their own consequences. I finally started to understand that the absolute best revenge is not loud, fiery, or screaming. It is quiet, it is decisive, and it is best served by simply letting toxic people lie in the terrible beds they have made for themselves. In the weeks and months that followed that explosive week, something strange and absolutely wonderful began to happen to my life. The viral story, which I initially thought would be a permanent, horrific stain on my professional career, turned into the complete opposite. It became my greatest calling card. Instead of being viewed as unstable or problematic, I was widely seen by the corporate world as a woman of immense integrity. I was seen as a highly competent professional who would never compromise on quality, and who had the absolute guts to fiercely stand up for herself against a smear campaign. My office phone started ringing constantly again, but this time, it was absolutely not with panicked calls from my toxic family. It was heavily booked with calls from massive potential clients. The very first big account was from the organizers of a major, citywide local music festival. The head organizer, a formidable, sharp woman named Sarah, met me for coffee. "I read that entire article about you," she said, stirring her cappuccino. Frankly, I was deeply impressed. Anyone who can keep their cool, act like a lawyer, and use hard facts to completely dismantle a malicious smear campaign like that is exactly the kind of person I want managing my $250,000 staging budget. We signed a massive contract that very same day. It was the biggest, most lucrative project of my entire career, coming with a salary boost I could have only dreamed of. After that, the floodgates of success completely opened. A young, wealthy couple who were planning their wedding reached out specifically to my firm. "We just want to work with someone who deeply values honesty," the bride-to-be told me warmly. "After reading your story, we knew you were our girl." A massive tech company hired my firm to totally redesign their new corporate headquarters. Not just for my architectural skills, but because, as their CEO put it bluntly, we highly value people with a strong, unbreakable backbone. My deep pain had been completely forged into a brand new kind of professional armor. It had become a shining testament to my character. I realized I had a massive choice. I could let the betrayal permanently define me and make me a bitter, angry woman, or I could use it as a strong foundation to build something brand new, something infinitely better. I absolutely chose to build. My little commercial operation, Marshall Designs, started to grow exponentially. I could not handle all the massive work myself anymore. 6 months after that fateful Hawaii trip, I hired my very first full-time employee, a bright, eager young architectural graduate named Maria. A few short months after that, I hired a dedicated project manager. I leased a beautiful, sunlit office in a renovated brick warehouse downtown, ironically not too far from the exact rooftop where my life had taken such a dramatic, painful turn. I made a solemn promise to myself that my new company would be the complete antithesis of the highly toxic environment my family had created. We operated strictly on principles of deep respect, open transparency, and mutual support. There was absolutely no backstabbing, no drama, no screaming. We celebrated each other's successes loudly. When we made mistakes, we owned them entirely and fixed them together. My business was not just a way to make a great living anymore. It was my safe sanctuary. My personal life began to deeply heal as well. I formally reconnected with the good friends I had neglected during the exhausting months I was consumed by the party planning. And eventually, I met someone wonderful. His name was Kenneth. He was a commercial landscape artist with a very kind smile and a calm, gentle energy that was a total balm to my previously battered soul. On our third or fourth date, as we were sitting at a quiet restaurant, I told him the entire story. I laid it all out honestly, fully expecting him to maybe see me as damaged goods with too much family baggage. He just listened incredibly patiently. And when I was completely done talking, he reached across the table and took my hand warmly in his. "It sounds like you went through absolute hell," he said softly. "But what I clearly hear is a story about a strong woman who finally found her own worth. That is not baggage, Francine. That is pure strength." Looking back now, the pure irony of the situation was staggering. By maliciously trying to declare me unworthy, by actively trying to cast me out as an embarrassment, my toxic family had inadvertently propelled me to a level of professional success and deep personal happiness I had never even imagined was possible. They truly thought my worth was completely tied to their conditional approval. But by aggressively setting me free from that desperate need, they had allowed me to truly discover my own immense value. I was busy building a brand new empire. A professional one built on strict integrity, and a personal one built on genuine love and mutual respect. And in this brand new empire, I was completely in charge, and the bitter ghosts of my past were absolutely not even allowed at the front gates. About a full year passed. A year of incredibly hard work, deep healing, and quiet, steady happiness. My architectural firm had just officially won a highly prestigious local design award for the music festival staging. My relationship with Kenneth was the absolute most stable, loving partnership I had ever known. Life was genuinely good. It was far more than good. It was peaceful. I had completely, permanently cut off all contact with my parents and my sister. Their numbers were blocked on my phone. Any physical letters they tried to send were immediately returned unopened. They were a dark chapter of my life that was firmly, irrevocably closed. One sunny, breezy afternoon, I was actively on site at our firm's newest massive project. It was a sleek, highly modern boutique hotel being built right in the heart of the city. It was a true career-defining project, exactly the kind of massive thing I used to dream about while sketching late at night in my college dorm room. I was standing proudly on what would eventually be the fifth-floor terrace, deeply discussing a complex structural detail with the site foreman. The entire bustling city of Nashville was sprawling out beautifully below us. As I gestured broadly towards a heavy steel support beam, my gaze drifted down to the busy street level far below. And that is exactly when I saw her. It was Jolene. I almost did not recognize my own sister at first glance. The highly confident, immaculately dressed, arrogant social climber was completely gone. In her exact place was a woman who looked incredibly, deeply tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy, greasy ponytail. She was wearing a drab, highly ill-fitting uniform for a nearby chain cafe, exactly the kind of cheap place that frantically turns out terrible coffee for rushing office workers. She was currently struggling to carry a massive, heavy-looking trash bag out to the large dumpster in the dirty back alleyway. She paused for a moment, pushing a stray strand of hair out of her sweating face, and her shoulders slumped with a heavy weariness that seemed to go so incredibly deep. The pure arrogance was gone. The nasty condescension was gone. All that was left was a hollowed-out, deeply defeated exhaustion. Our eyes absolutely did not meet. She had no earthly idea I was hundreds of feet above her, confidently watching from the luxurious terrace of a massive building that represented absolutely everything I had built since the day she maliciously tried to tear me down. A very strange feeling washed over me. It was not a feeling of triumph. It was absolutely not pity. It was not even lingering anger. It was absolutely nothing. Just a quiet, completely detached acknowledgement of a life that was absolutely no longer connected to mine in any way. She was just a random person on a street, painfully living out the very real consequences of her terrible choices, just as I was happily living out the massive rewards of mine. The foreman asked me a technical question, and I simply turned away from the window, back to my detailed blueprints, back to my wonderful life. I did not give her a second glance. The sighting was not a highly dramatic, movie climax. There was absolutely no confrontation, no final, cutting words spoken in an alley. And in its own, quiet way, that was the absolute most powerful ending of all. Her fate, her daily struggles, her obvious unhappiness. They simply no longer had any emotional hold on me. She had become entirely, completely irrelevant to my existence. As I drove home to Kenneth that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in beautiful hues of orange and pink, I thought deeply about the massive lesson I had finally learned. I had spent so much of my life truly believing that family was an unbreakable, sacred bond. I thought it was an unconditional source of love and support. But I had learned the incredibly hard way that sometimes, family is simply the random people you happen to share blood with. The real bonds, the ones that actually matter and sustain you, are the ones built firmly on mutual respect, on genuine kindness, on mutual appreciation. I had tried so incredibly hard for years to be the perfect, accommodating sister, the perfect, generous daughter. But the real victory was not in getting flashy revenge. It was in the exact moment I finally stopped trying to earn their conditional love, and started actively giving myself my own deep respect. That is the rock-solid foundation I built my entirely new life on. And unlike the flimsy, superficial party I once designed for my sister, this was one beautiful structure that would never, ever collapse. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. It is not an easy one to tell, but sharing it here helps. I have to wonder, have any of you ever had to make the incredibly difficult choice to completely walk away from toxic family just to protect your own peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your personal stories and your continued support truly mean the world to me. And if you found some strength in my story, I would be so incredibly grateful if you would hit that like button and subscribe for more. Take care of yourselves out there.